Welcome to the 6th video in my Simple Shed build series. In this video, I'm building and hanging the door. I'm using my Jessem Dowel Jig and 1/2-inch dowels for all the joinery. And if you're interested in using magnets to pull your door shut, check out my short where I hide a couple of magnets in the door jamb with corresponding magnets in the bottom of the door to pull the door shut and keep it shut. I'm going to get started with the dowels.
The Jessem Dowel Jig comes with an indexing pen that makes adding additional holes to the left or right of your initial setup quick and simple. It also helps to secure the jig in place, and most of the time when I'm using the pen, I don't use clamps.
So I've drilled most of the dowels and I'm now at a point where I'd like to transfer these holes onto the corresponding uprights. I've marked where they go and I've also labeled all of my parts. It's also important to know which faces you're referencing off so that you're consistent with the joining boards. I'm going to go ahead and just join together the two uprights and clamp them together. I'm using a scrap piece of wood that will provide the correct offset, and then I'll just drill the dowels, the holes, on one side like this and then on the other side like this, and so I can reference off the same piece for both of them. I always find it a little bit tricky to dowel the holes for a joint when I can't rely on a perpendicular edge. In this case, with these angled cross pieces, I want to put dowels here and here, but I can't line this up. I can't line my dowel jig up exactly across this, against this edge. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to transfer that edge to the stile here. I will reference that line when I'm drilling on this face, and then to drill on the cross brace, I will go ahead and reference against this edge here, against this edge of the dowel jig. To give myself a little bit of wiggle room, I'm going to use a card and elongate the holes on the stile by 12 thousandths of an inch on either side of the hole. And I feel like that will make up for not having the perpendicular edge to get the alignment just right. So I'm right on the line.
For these small adjustments, you want to securely clamp the jig, otherwise the drill will just follow the original hole.
So one moves it back to where it was, and then the next one moves it over one. $73 1/4, $73 1/4. I'm doing the glue up in 3 parts. The first part I put the dowels in these rails and the cross members. And the second part I actually glued these rails to the upright. And I use my bench with my dogs because I know I get a right angle when I do that. The third part is just going to be finish gluing everything, and put the panels in.
I only have 2 decent clamps that will span the width of this door, so I have to move them around and use a little persuasion to pull all the joints together. I'm using a simple jig to guide my router when cutting the mortises. These are easy to make, and they make quick work of routing the rebates needed for the butt hinges.
So I've just finished cutting out the mortises and drilling the holes for the hinges. And I think what I'm going to do in order to attach this to the frame on the shed is to just use a story stick. I have a scrap piece of wood, and I'll transfer the hinge locations onto the piece of wood, and then I'll go ahead and scribe these from this piece onto the shed. And I think that'll just be a lot easier than manhandling the shed door into the space and then trying to single-handedly line up the holes and drill them for where the hinges will go. So now that I've hung my shed door, I'm going to go ahead and put a lock on it. I'm going to use this long throw gate lock. I splurged on this. It's not cheap, but I like the way it's made, and I'm going to go ahead and use this for my shed. Template, instructions, keys, faceplate, catch, and the lock. Screws, drill bits, metric. So the cylinder would stick out too far on my door, so to provide the appropriate amount of distance so that it's basically flush with the front of the door, I'm going to use a 3/4 inch piece of Baltic birch. So with this in place, it should be just right. I want the Baltic birch faceplate to be just a little bit larger than the plate on the lock. So the lock comes with a 19mm spade bit. I'm going to go ahead and use my 3/4 inch Forstner bit because I can get a cleaner cut with it. Now for the smaller part of the keyhole, this part here, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch Forstner bit. So now we just have to trim off here and here. So an added benefit of having to make this extension for the plate on the back so that the lock lines up with the door is I can just use this as a template for drilling out the holes. So because I failed to take into consideration the lock hitting the door jamb, I ended up having to cut the door jamb. So I just used my router to route out this section, and then I cut this on my table saw. Then I transferred this area right here on the door jamb, which is where the bolt's going to go, to the inside of the frame. And I'm just going to use a Forstner bit to drill that out.
Well, that wraps up this video on making and hanging my simple shed door. I hope you found something useful. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.